You're watching Local 4, home of clickondetroit.com. WDIV Local 4 News at 5 starts now.
Any reaction at all?
Kwame Kilpatrick, stunned and speechless.
Not at this time. I don't have any comment.
Guilty of racketeering, extortion, and that's not all. His buddy, Bobby Ferguson,
It's a temporary situation.
also guilty, but maintaining his faith.
God is good all the time. My faith ain't changed now.
While Father Bernard Kilpatrick escapes with just one conviction and continues standing by his son.
What about your son taking millions of dollars from our city? What about Bobby Ferguson?
He didn't take a dime.
He didn't take a dime? He was found guilty, sir.
Kwame didn't take a dime.
This afternoon, the last time we'll see Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson as free men for many years.
That's right. It tops our news at 5. It was their last taste of freedom because late this afternoon, a federal judge ruled they'd be held in custody until their sentencing. They were taken to Milan this afternoon. Now, the only one who remains free is Bernard Kilpatrick. He was only found guilty on one charge, but the jury found Kwame Kilpatrick guilty on 24 of 30 counts, and Bobby Ferguson guilty on 9 of 11. The entire Local 4 News team is covering this breaking story from every angle. We begin right now with Local 4 defender Kevin Dietz. Kevin, quite a day here today.
Kwame Kilpatrick handcuffed in the courtroom and hauled off to prison, convicted on 24 separate felony counts that will put him in prison for 15 to 20 years. His sentence started today. Kwame Kilpatrick had it all. Detroit's youngest mayor ready to make his mark. Keys to the Manoogian mansion, a private security detail, and over $150,000 a year in salary. It wasn't enough. Kwame Kilpatrick wanted more, much more. Private jets, walking around money, trips to Vegas, and $4,000 suits. To get it, he extorted businesses, saying pay up or no work. They paid up, giving the mayor hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, clothes, and vacations. It still wasn't enough. Kilpatrick demanding huge donations to his civic fund, supposedly for the kids of Detroit. The only kids who benefited were his own, with free camps. Kwame used the Kilpatrick Civic Fund for vacations with his girlfriend, vacations with his family, golf clubs, yoga, and more. Still not enough. He made his fundraiser, Emma Bell, cough up half her commissions, hundreds of thousands of dollars in kickbacks. Today, the jury said, that's enough. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 24 times they said guilty to racketeering, extortion, wire fraud, tax evasion. The convictions carrying a penalty of 20 years. Kilpatrick looked like he was run over by a truck as he came out of the courthouse. Mr. Kilpatrick.
How you feel?
What do you have to say, sir?
Everybody back.
Your wife in here?
How you
Gotta
feel?
go back. Any reaction at all?
Not at this
Everybody
time.
needs to go back. You admit it now, Kwame? 5, 6, 7.
Not at this time. I don't have any comment.
But the judge wasn't finished. At a bond hearing just hours later, she said, close call, but there's too much missing money. Kwame's lied too many times to the courts, to probation officers. Bond is denied. Take the prisoner into custody. Kilpatrick took off his sport coat, took off his cufflinks, handed his driver's license to his mother, put his hands behind his back, and was handcuffed and hauled away. His attorney, Jim Thomas.
It's judicial discretion. The standard is very high. The case law is against us.
There was no outcry from supporters, just sadness that the kid, with all that potential, threw it all away, ripping off taxpayers for millions in much-needed city money to live large like the hip-hop mayor nickname he was given. Kwame Kilpatrick left the courthouse in handcuffs. He is already down at Milan Prison, where he will stay until sentencing day. He then will stay there likely in that same prison for the remainder of his sentence, which is 15 to 20 years. There was no celebration here around the courthouse. Nobody was clapping or cheering that Kilpatrick was convicted. There also is no outcry from Kilpatrick's supporters that he was wronged in some way. Most everybody sort of just sighing and looking at this at the end of a very long and ugly chapter in the history of Detroit, hoping for better days ahead. Reporting live at the federal courthouse, Kevin Dietz, Defenders.
Now, Kevin, we were watching this, I know, pretty much throughout the entire day, and we didn't get a sense that perhaps Jim Thomas had not prepared Kwame Kilpatrick for the stunning guilty verdicts that he received today.
Well, he came in today hoping for an acquittal. That did not happen. He knew it was a possibility that he would be convicted for sure. I'm not sure that he thought he would be sent to prison immediately. Right. It's very rare for corruption cases to end this way, where the guilty party is locked up and sent to prison immediately. Usually they are allowed to go free and spend time with their family. That judge saying it was a close call, but in this case, there's just too many questions, too much of a possibility that Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson might try and flee the country. She was not going to allow that to happen. She ordered them locked up today, and that's the way this story came to a tragic end.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Well, Kwame Kilpatrick's longtime friend, and we can now say partner in crime, will also remain in custody. After the verdicts, Bobby Ferguson maintained his innocence, saying it's not over yet. But both Ferguson and Kilpatrick today, it marked the end of the road. Let's get to Local 4 defender Karen Drew for a look at the case against Bobby Ferguson. Karen?
You know, Carmen, when you take a look at the case of Bobby Ferguson, it is similar to Kwame Kilpatrick. He started out as a minority contractor in the city. He took part in construction of Comerica Park, Ford Field, volunteered to tear down abandoned houses to make the city better. That's not what the jury believed, though, about this man. They believed he did take part in steering some $83 million in contracts towards his company, Ferguson Enterprises. And now Bobby Ferguson sits in prison. As Bobby Ferguson made his way into court this morning, he wasn't talking much except to quote Bible verses.
My statement is from the Bible.
Okay.
Psalms 37, verses 1 through 40. Read that. That's my statement.
He seemed confident and strong when walking into the courtroom. He actually high-fived some inside. But once the verdict was read, the mood changed. The contractor was found guilty of 9 of 11 counts, including extortion, bribery, and racketeering. He could be sentenced up to 20 years. Jurors believe Ferguson and Kilpatrick took part in an intricate scheme of extorting those who did business in the city of Detroit for their financial gain.
They looked at each piece of evidence individually and each count individually, and they made their decision accordingly, and we have to live with that. Even though, you know, we respectfully disagree, it is what it is.
Walking out of court, a rush of reporters surround the longtime Kilpatrick friend and contractor. He again doesn't talk, except to quote a Bible verse again.
God is good all the time.
During the bond hearing later in the day, the prosecution stated Ferguson was a flight risk. He had $83 million in ill-gotten gains, had pistol whipped someone in the past, traveled to South Africa, Ghana, and Saudi Arabia, and could not be trusted to be out on bond and was a flight risk. The judge agreed. When the marshals approached Kilpatrick and Ferguson, both men took their jackets off, belts and cufflinks off as well. Kilpatrick took his license out of his pocket, handed it to his mother, and said to Ferguson, quote, "We won't need this where we are going." And that is right. When speaking to Ferguson outside of court, he mentioned numerous times Bible verses. When speaking to his attorney, he said he has a strong faith, and now he must rely on that faith for the next questionable amount of years. Of course, we'll have to wait until sentencing day. Back to you.
Now, Karen, when you talked with Bobby Ferguson earlier in the day, he said it's not over yet. What do you think he meant by that?
You know, it's interesting. I really believe that he didn't feel that he would be found guilty. And then when he was found guilty, he didn't feel that he would be sent to jail. You know, obviously there's talk of whether or not there would be an appeal, but it's just this strange aura that they still feel like they're not giving up. So, I mean, that's all I can surmise, you know, is that perhaps maybe his hope of an appeal, but insiders tell me that would be quite unlikely.
And certainly premature on a day like today. Our Karen Drew reporting for us live. Thank you, Karen. Well, Bernard Kilpatrick faced a total of 4 charges, the most serious being racketeering conspiracy. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on that count, but he was found not guilty of attempted extortion in connection to a sludge contract.
Well, Bernard was on a roll early, also found not guilty of filing a false tax return in 2004. But the jury did find Bernard Kilpatrick guilty of having a false tax return in 2005. That was his one and only conviction. After the verdicts were announced, Bernard Kilpatrick made no mention of his own fate, but maintained his son Kwame's innocence.
Mr. Kilpatrick, your reaction today to those not guilties and non-decisions? You said you felt good going out. How do you feel now?
Terrible.
Terrible for your son?
Absolutely.
Yes. You think the jury got it wrong?
Absolutely.
What about about your son taking millions of dollars from our city? What about Bobby Ferguson?
He didn't take a dime.
He didn't take a dime? He was found guilty, sir.
Kwame didn't take a dime.
Then who took the money? Yeah, you were found guilty, sir. Any comment?
So tonight, while Kwame Kilpatrick is in federal prison, Bernard Kilpatrick will remain free until his sentencing. A date for that hearing has not yet been set.
Well, joining us now is U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid and Bob Foley, a special agent in charge of the Detroit Division. You heard Father Bernard Kilpatrick coming out of after the verdicts were read and saying Kwame didn't take a dime. How do you respond to that?
Well, the jury has responded, I think, in their verdict. The jury found the defendants guilty on some of the most serious charges. Kwame Kilpatrick, the evidence showed that he took $840,000 of unexplained income into his bank accounts. That's what we can account for. It also shows that he sent $83 million worth of extorted contracts to Bobby Ferguson. So I submit that the jury has answered that question, that he took a lot more than a dime. All right. And
Bob, your thoughts on the stunning verdicts today? Guilty on the most serious of charges?
Guilty on the most serious of charges, and the right result. We worked diligently between all of the investigators and the prosecution team to ensure the right result was reached, and all the evidence pointed to what the jury found, and that is guilty.
In putting this case together, what surprised you most? Did the text messages, the volume of text messages that were available to you or to the government, did that assist you in putting this case together?
It certainly did. You know, the case like this relies on a lot of different pieces coming together. Certainly cooperating witnesses were an important part of the case, people who were part of that inner circle who could explain what happened. But I think that jurors look for corroboration when you have cooperating witnesses. And so the text messages, the bank records, and the invoices, I think all were very important to bringing it all together.
Now, Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson both insist that the government got it wrong, that they are innocent men. But yet, you said the jury said and felt differently. Where is the money, do you think?
Well, we found $840,000 in Kwame Kilpatrick's bank account that he couldn't account for, $500,000 in Bernard Kilpatrick's bank account that he couldn't account for, $1.2 million in a safe in Bobby Ferguson's office. So that's some of the money. Whether there's more money out there, I can't say, but certainly it cost the taxpayers of the city of Detroit at least that much.
And Bob, any more money out there?
We're always looking. Of course, we certainly know that the stuff we have identified and the funds we have identified, we're working on seizing, and we'll work diligently on the rest.
And for the citizens of Detroit, is this really over?
Well, the case against Kwame Kilpatrick is really over. We'll continue to look for public corruption wherever it may lie. And so we just hope that today's case is not so much about the past, but about the future, and puts all of our public officials on notice that they're here to serve the people, not themselves.
All right. Barbara McQuaid, Bob Foley, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
All right. Steve?
And what a long path it has been to get here. Remember way back in September, that's when this trial started. There were actually 4 defendants. Maybe you recall this guy, water boss Victor Mercado. He was right in the center of it for a time. He was charged with conspiracy. He was accused of taking bribes, but he wasn't part of it very long. About a month into the trial, he pleaded guilty. So what happens with him? Well, he is still awaiting sentence, and he could face up to 18 months in prison.
And we've got an entire section on clickondetroit.com. It's dedicated to the Kilpatrick guilty verdict. We've got reaction and certainly the next steps. You'll find the special coverage box on the home page. It's filled with information. And our coverage of the Kilpatrick trial verdict continues just ahead. They lived and breathed the Kilpatrick trial for more than 5 months of their lives, and coming up, what the members of the jury are saying about the verdict and how they came to their decision.
And delivering balloons to his mother's house, shouts of support from the streets. We'll see who continues to stand by Kwame Kilpatrick. That's when we come back.
Shortly after the Kilpatrick corruption trial verdict, members of the jury were seen getting dropped off in a parking lot, going to their cars and taking off. And tomorrow, when they wake up, they won't have to worry about heading to the courthouse for testimony or deliberations. Their service to the city is over.
Many, many months of hard work for those people. They did a good job. Several members of the jury did speak behind closed doors about the verdict and how they reached it. Joining us now live is local court defender Hank Winchester. Hank?
Steve Carmen, I'm sorry, the audio cut out here. I'm sorry, as you were introducing this piece here. Let me talk to you about this. It was very interesting to hear from the men and women of the jury, whether you agree or disagree with how things played out today. One thing is for sure, the men and women of this case were very dedicated. They showed up every day on time. They say they all took the judge's orders very seriously, not to pay attention to local media, and also to pay attention to the facts and the evidence of this case. And that is what they said they did. The jurors spoke when they delivered the verdict and then spoke in the courtroom afterwards to the media, answering questions for almost an hour, taking us further inside the case than we've ever been before. Watching these men and women interact with each other was impressive. It is clear they have great respect for each other. They were asked a variety of questions about the witnesses and the verdict. When asked if any witness or piece of evidence stood out, juror number 9 said, "We looked at the evidence as a whole. There wasn't one piece of evidence that sealed the deal." When asked if it was hard to avoid all the media coverage, juror number 1 said, "For me, it wasn't a big temptation. We were given rules, and we followed those rules." When asked what message the verdict sends, juror number 12 said, "If you want to do something illegal, a jury will make the correct decision." Juror number 11 said she had previously voted twice for Kwame Kilpatrick and said this about the case. She said, "I wouldn't call it anger. I would call it disappointment. I saw a lot of evidence that turned my stomach. I couldn't believe this was going on." She went on to say, "I feel bad for the children. I don't feel bad for any of the defendants." And that message echoed by many of the men and women that were on this jury. One other thing they were asked whether the presence of Carlita Kilpatrick and the Kilpatrick children in the courtroom during closing arguments, whether that played a role in their decision-making process. And all of the jurors responded by saying no, not at all. Again, they were told to look at the facts and the evidence in this case, and they say that is exactly what they did in handing down this verdict. We're live here. Hank Winchester, back to you.
All right, and their job is over. Our Hank Winchester reporting for us live. Thank you, Hank. Well, Governor Snyder released a statement a short time ago regarding the corruption trial verdicts.
Yeah, the governor says, quote, "This is an unfortunate chapter in the city's history that is now closed. It's time to turn the page. The law enforcement and legal systems have done their jobs. We all need to focus on working together and helping move Detroit forward and being strong and successful again." Mayor Bing also released a statement. He says, "I am pleased that this long trial has ended and we can finally put this negative chapter in Detroit's history behind us. It's time for all of us to move forward with a renewed commitment to transparency and high ethical standards in our city government."
Well, there's much more ahead as we cover the Kilpatrick guilty verdicts and reaction. Coming up at 5:30, the impact this case has had on the city, and hear from some of Kwame Kilpatrick's family members now speaking out. Then at 6, a look at the rise and fall of Kwame Kilpatrick, a once promising young politician now headed to prison for likely a very long time.
I'm Chuck Gatica. Temp isn't bad, but we're still plenty drippy out there. 50 degrees, the current reading, 96% relative humidity, and currently we still have rain around. Doppler radar shows what's going on. We are seeing the rain end from southwest to northeast, but still some splotches of moderate to heavy shower activity out there. So we're not done yet. Tonight, overnight, it's mostly rain, although late we could see a few wet snowflakes mix in. Tomorrow, colder with flakes flying and still a chill. Get a load of these numbers for the day. High temp has hit 56 after midnight. 49 has been the low so far, so no matter how you look at it, there are the averages. We've been mild all the way around, even though we've been drippy. Temps now are mid-40s to near 50 as we go wide. Back out here, there it is. You can see the colder air, 30s, even some 20s, and a lot of that chilly air is going to wrap back in. There's a little stripe of snow shower activity. There's another one, all with this counterclockwise circulation around low pressure, so the moisture is pulling out. Computer model does a pretty good job showing that. There's the low now. Rain pulls out in the next couple of hours, but rotating around, not just overnight into the day tomorrow. Scattered snow showers, most of it light, but you thought we were done. Not quite yet. Nighttime low tonight gets us down to about 32 degrees, so we could still get a wet snow shower in there late. Daytime tomorrow, periodic snow showers as the colder air comes across the Great Lakes. 37 for the high. That's all we get. Most of this stuff's going to melt, even though it's light. And as we head for the next couple of days, notice temps go down for a couple days, and then they start meandering back up to near the averages. So all in all, not bad. But what a past couple of days when it comes to temperature. You know, it wasn't always dry, but it sure has felt good.
Yeah, it sure did.
Spring is in the air. What do you think? Well, coming up.
New at 6.
Book bags are usually filled with school supplies, but something a local 6th grader was packing had the school calling police.
Yeah, now it wasn't a weapon, but it was still pretty troubling for the people involved.
And our coverage of the Kwame Kilpatrick guilty verdicts continues. New at 6, the emotional scene playing out inside the courtroom that you haven't heard about. You know, you could feel it throughout the city as the guilty verdicts were handed down to Kwame Kilpatrick and the co-defendants.
And as it was felt here in Detroit, it was also heard around the nation and really around the world.
And Ruth joins us now. And Ruth, the verdicts made national headlines today, didn't they?
Yes, they did, and some international headlines as well. Carmen and Steve, this Kilpatrick case is making headlines on almost every news website that we've checked. Sometimes big and bold on the home page, but other times tucked away in a corner. Either way, these verdicts are a topic of conversation outside this area. This headline at the Huffington Post reads, Kwame Kilpatrick guilty. Former Detroit mayor found guilty in federal trial. The Washington Post headline reads, jury convicts ex-Detroit mayor Kwame Kilpatrick of racketeering, conspiracy, corruption. And at the New York Daily News, disgraced former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick convicted of corruption charges, ensuring return to prison. And then across the pond at the UK Daily Mail, a lot more detail. This one reads, ex-Detroit mayor convicted of corruption after he stole nearly $1 million and spent cash from charity for needy city residents on yoga lessons, golf clubs, and travel. So our ex-mayor is both famous and infamous tonight all around the world.
And who says that people are not interested in what goes on in the Motor City, huh? Not only here on our side of the pond, but across the pond as well.
Yeah, well, they were also such sweeping charges, you know, and RICO is so hard to prove, very hard to prove, and they did it, yeah.
We so need to move away from this as a city, don't we?
And
oh, boy.
Now we can.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, now we can.
All right, you're welcome.
We have much more coming up after the break, including some other local headlines.
An update, for example, on the West Bloomfield grandmother on trial accused of killing her grandson, what drug investigators say the teen used shortly before his killing.
And a plane high above downtown Detroit with a very specific message for Kwame Kilpatrick, who was behind this stunt.
And next, the impact his trial and now guilty verdict has had on the city of Detroit. We'll be back after this.